All right, so welcome everyone to our Time to Restore quarterly call. I'm Erin Postumus, Outreach Coordinator with the USA National Phenology Network. Maybe because there's not too many of us, we could just go around and do quick intros. You could say where you're from, anything you want to share about how you're kind of involved in the project. I'll pass it to Alyssa first.
I'm Alyssa Rose Martin. I work with Erin at the National Phenology Network, based in the Northeast. Great to be here.
Do you want to pass it to someone? We could each kind of pass it on.
Sure, yeah, I'll pass it to Stephanie.
Hey, I am in Oklahoma City. I'm Stephanie Jordan. I'm in Oklahoma City. I work for the Nature Conservancy. I'm their pollinator outreach coordinator. We are the only nature conservancy in North America to have one of those, which we have because we are such a key place for monarchs to migrate. So, and I pass it to DC Davidson.
Hello, my name is Donald Davidson. I'm an environmental steward intern at the Jean Lafitte National Park Preserve under Dr. Julie Whitbeck. I have worked in my time here at the National Parks. I've helped reestablish the Nature's Notebook trails and signage post Hurricane Ida, and helping to develop a enough of a working model to be able to pass it on after my internship.
Awesome.
I'll pass it on to CRS or CRSS. I'm sorry.
Hey everyone, can y'all hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm Charles Sassine. I'm with Padre Island National Seashore. I am in the Resources Management Division. I'm a biologist, and I have been a lepidopterist for about 25 years. I'm mostly into the Heliconiidae and the Pierids, which are your sulfurs and longwings. A lot of my current work is mostly in the moths right now. And I'll pass it to Sam.
Sam says in the chat, hey all, I can't talk much since I'm open floor plan office, but I'm Sam with Texas Department of Transportation, vegetation specialist, and oversee TxDOT's enrollment in the Monarch CCAA. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's a conservation action plan of some kind.
Oh, there you go. Candidate conservation agreement with assurances.
Assurances. Cool. Maybe Katie could jump in next.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Katie Boyer. I'm with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and I am the at-risk species coordinator for Texas and Oklahoma. I previously was our monarch lead since 2015 for the region, and so have carried on pollinators as kind of a focus area of at-risk species work moving forward. So nice to see y'all.
Hey, welcome. And then
I'll go ahead and go
Yeah,
next.
go
This
ahead.
is Dennis Martin. I'm with Oklahoma State University Vegetation Management and Turf Specialist. I work 20% time contract to the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. And while I'm not their biologist, I work closely with their biologists in advancing best management practices for weed control in things like their wildflower plots and in their cooperative agreement plots with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And also help in training about 800 of their employees in BMPs so as to try to have the least negative impact on invertebrate species.
Awesome. Welcome. All right.
And Julie, did you want to introduce yourself, Julie?
Sure, I'll introduce myself. Julie Whitbeck. I'm the ecologist for Jean Lafitte National Historical Park and Preserve, as Donnie mentioned. And so the park is a distributed park, 6 sites in southeastern Louisiana. At 2 of the sites, we implement Nature's Notebook, and we are considering adding some of the target species for the pollinator project for this Restore project to our Nature's Notebook trails. Thanks.
Awesome.
Welcome. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. We do have a few slides here. I think I can do this. Okay. Okay, so just kind of a plan for today. I don't know that we have our state folks that are the state leads on the call yet. Hopefully they'll join us in a bit. So maybe we can do that part at the end. We'll also be sharing an update on the data that we have collected so far, as well as kind of the progress that we've made on starting to do some preliminary data analysis. And then I wanted to share a couple grant opportunities that are relevant. And then if anyone else has anything they want to share, we'll kind of open it up as well. If you know of any grant opportunities or workshops or conferences, anything that you want to share about, we'll do that at the end as well. I think everyone is familiar with what we're doing here, but just to kind of like give us an overview again of the Time to Restore project. Our kind of overall goal with this effort is to give more information to those of you that are working on pollinator restoration about the phenology, which is the timing of life cycle events of nectar plants, kind of a better understanding of when things are blooming, as well as when they're going to seed for purposes of seed harvest. And we're also interested in bringing in climate change information to kind of understand how things are going to be changing in the future. So I think a lot of you were with us last year when we started our workshops back in the fall. And so we did a lot of work to kind of understand your priorities for different species and different locations. And then we settled on our kind of short list of species. And so right now we're really in our data collection stage where we're trying to get as much information as we can about the life cycles of these plants at different spots around the South Central region. And eventually next summer, we're going to be really getting into the synthesis of this information. We're going to share kind of the progress on that so far. And then, eventually we'll be, making sure that the information that we're presenting to you all in the form of different kinds of deliverables like maps or info sheets is relevant and useful for you, and then potentially making changes to that, those things as well. So this project is supported by the South Central Climate Adaptation Science Center. Our funding goes through next September, and we're hoping that we'll be able to extend the project. We've applied for additional funding, so we're hoping to keep this going for several more years. All right, so just a little bit of a note on why we're collecting this data. So as I mentioned, we really want to aid those working in pollinator restoration with a better understanding of the timing of flowering and fruiting. And based on what we learned from talking with you all last fall, we asked you about, what are your preference for the kind of information you want? Are you really interested in when things start flowering, when they peak in their flowering, kind of when is the most nectar available, or how long is the season? And really, you said everything. We really want all of those things, especially the onset and the peak. So that's kind of what we focused on so far. But really, you're interested in all of those kind of aspects of phenology. And then also, when are the seeds ripe and ready for collection, for harvest, and then restoration work. And then another big aspect of what we're doing is we're trying to understand how climate change is going to impact the timing. So we kind of ask you about, what are you particularly concerned about in that area? And a couple of things really came up was these warmer springs that we're seeing, is that going to advance the timing of the flowering and the seed timing? And then will the peak in when the most flowers are open or the most nectar is available going to be delayed? So those are just a couple of the questions. And I know a lot of people are also interested in extreme events, things like those freezes that we've been seeing in the South Central, as well as things like the heavy rainfall events. How is that going to shift the timing as well? So we're exploring all of those different things. So this is kind of our short list of priority species that we've decided on. There are this was across the 4 different states kind of the ones that when we did the voting activity in our workshops last fall, the ones that kind of came up as fairly widespread, easy to identify, things that a lot of people would have available for monitoring. And of course, I'm sure this isn't a comprehensive list of all the things we would like to monitor, but we do have to kind of focus in on, a small subset of species so that we can make sure we have enough data to answer those kind of questions from the previous slide and really get into having enough data where we can, do some analyses. So one of our goals from our proposal was to have enough information where we could do some analyses, and we looked at different studies and we came up with something that's called a site year as a kind of a sample size that we would need to have. And this is basically an onset, which would be, the start of flowering or the peak in flowering or the start of seed timing when ripe seeds are happening at a particular site in a particular year. And generally, we understand that if we have at least 30, that's like a good place to start. So 30 site years. So that would be either 30 sites in 1 year or a couple of sites spread out over a bunch of years. That is kind of what we're aiming for. Although we realize that if there's a lot of variability, we might need to have a lot more than that. But we kind of wanted to do a check-in on like how are we doing towards that goal. So this is a summary of how much Nature's Notebook data we have available for the onset of open flowers and the onset of ripe fruits. So that's the start of those different stages in the different species. And we really only have 5 so far where we have data in Nature's Notebook from that list of 8. And the one that we have closest to 30 is probably the common sunflower. We also have quite a few onsets for common buttonbush, as well as ripe fruits, but we really don't have that minimum number yet. So we're really interested in, getting more information on the flowering and fruiting so we can have enough data to even like get a start on doing those kind of analyses. And then looking at kind of more broadly, because a lot of these species do have ranges that are beyond the South Central region. I also pulled the information that we have on this list of 8 from the whole country in Nature's Notebook. And that looks a little bit better. So we might be able to pull in some data from beyond the South Central region when we do our analyses. We're just not sure if the timing is going to be really different than what we see in the South Central region. There could be a lot of variation. A lot of these eastern purple coneflower sites are going to be like in the Midwest or in the eastern part of the country. So it might not be as relevant, but at least shows us kind of which species do have quite a bit of data across the country, and that might help us a little bit in getting to that goal of the at least 30 site years. And then I also just wanted to show a couple of the visualizations from our NPN visualization tool. And this is something you can explore on your own if you're interested, but just to kind of see like what the data look like so far. So this is showy milkweed data from New Mexico from this year, looking at the open flowers and ripe fruits. And these bars represent when someone went out to make an observation, and they're gray because they actually show that the person looked for this happening and did not see it. So this is a negative data or an observation of no for that life cycle stage. So we can see pretty consistent observations for showy milkweed, but we haven't seen open flowers or ripe fruits yet. That might be something that'll happen later on in the year. But this negative data is still really interesting and will be used in our analyses as well. So definitely encourage people, even if you're not seeing flowers or fruits on your plants, please just input that anyway, and it's really helpful. And then here is a graph showing common buttonbush. This is from Louisiana. And this is what's called an activity curve, and it shows the kind of the magnitude of activity over the course of this year. For open flowers is orange here, and then ripe fruits is that bluish color. And this shows us the proportion of people that said yes versus no. So this gives us an idea of like when the most people were saying yes. And we can see that it really peaks around about the middle of July for both open flowers and ripe fruits. And then we see there's another tick going back up here. So that's kind of one way to look at the information that we have so far within Nature's Notebook. And then here's another similar graph for Texas for a couple species, just open flowers in common sunflower and eastern purple coneflower. And you can see that we did some outreach in Texas in the summer, and so that's when people started observing there. So we don't have a very complete record like we do in this one, where we can see, people were saying no back here, and then they started saying yes. Here we just know, as soon as they started going out, they were saying yes. So this kind of drives home the importance of those negative records as well. I think I'm gonna pass it to Alyssa at this point.
Thanks. Yes, so one of the original visions of the proposal was to create calendars showing the flowering and the peak in flowering and fruiting over time. And so this is like the very first prototype of a calendar. So it's a box plot where there's kind of 2 box plots overlaid for each phenophase. So the data along the bottom, April to October, you can see flower buds starting in June and ending in July, but with lots of outliers a bunch of outliers in both directions. And this is for the whole country. So this one's not unrestricted. And then so there might be flower buds, and then a shorter period where we have all of the flowers are open, or more of the flowers are open. And then intense, so peak flowering. This is actually the very first time I think that we have ever synthesized and presented information on peak flowering. So we can see that peak is shorter than the total period that open flowers, and the whole thing seems to center in July. And then if we go, this is with 48 records for peaks, 144 records for status. And then if you go to the next slide, I slimmed it down to just the data from the South Central, so we can kind of see what that looks like when we just restrict it to our region. We still see a centering in July, but with fewer records concentrated there. Still some outliers on the early sides where maybe we're seeing some early initiation of flowering in buttonbush. And then on the next slide, I dug into what data we have available across latitude. So this is the onset of peak bloom. So like from the top bar from the calendar, when were we seeing that peak start across latitude? And then I just, even from my own, wrapping my head around it, I put this map with the latitudinal bar. So this is 30 that runs through southern Louisiana, Texas. So we have a bunch of onsets happening. Really, peak is starting in different locations, but along that latitudinal bar throughout June through August. And then as we go further north, we see these records maybe a little bit later, peak further north. Maybe I'm like squinting to see that pattern, but just to get a sense of like where we have more northern and more southern data for this species. And then the next one is also just so thinking now more about, we have variation in terms of location, and then we have variation in terms of site. So this the sites are the same color here. So like if you're looking at like this hot pink one, that's the same location observing over 3 or 4 years. And then you have like maybe the green site is one that just started in 2021. So we're going to have to account for, it's cool in the one sense that like we're able to pull, because we have standardized method and the data is all stored in the same place. We can pull across a bunch of sites and get information from all the way back to 2013. But then there's also going to be tricks like if more northern sites joined later and more southern sites are earlier, we might see a pattern that looks like a trend over time, but it's really just a shift in who was observing over those times. So we'll be digging into all of that and making calendars that take that into account. But I think that's all to say about that one. And then since sunflower looked so good in the data summary that Erin put together, I looked at sunflower as well. The similar kind of calendar idea where you're seeing where the bulk of open flower thing is happening, and where peak is happening. And this is just for the South Central region. So I guess, do I have another slide after this? No. So I think maybe just sticking on this for a second, it'd be great to hear if people have thoughts about this format of presenting the information, or the yeah, or anything that came up in terms of thinking about like what we're really trying to get at is information that's going to be useful in your location, and dealing with the fact that different years, or like there's early years and late years, there's different climate patterns in different locations. So kind of thoughts on either of those, on how to present the data and how to cope with the variation. Thanks, Sam. Yeah, he says more data points would be useful. Common sunflower blooms in Texas very early, even year round in South Texas. Yeah, so it seems like maybe we're missing some of that information on the full year round. I think this yeah. And Julie says she likes the box and Worcester calendars. The problem is different sites at different latitudes with observations starting persisting different years. It's challenging. Yeah, totally. And maybe I'll ask Sam or others, like, do you think with the common sunflower, is your experience that it's sort of, is there a peak? Is there really a peak? Is there a time of year when it's happening more, or is it sort of just like semi-continuously a few are in bloom all throughout the year? Well, we can keep the combo going in the chat, but maybe I'll pass it back to Erin. Thank you.
All right, so as you can kind of see, there are some gaps still in here in what we know, and so of course it would always be great to have more data. So I just kind of wanted to open it up to hear your thoughts on how we can kind of increase the number of sites that we have, you know, the different species that are being tracked across the South Central, and hear about, you know, if there are any barriers that you all have run into as you're trying to ask people to participate in the project or do it yourself, kind of like anything that's come up. So totally open at this point if you want to share. I will share, so Gail Bishop is our the coordinator for the Gulf Coast Phenology Trail, and she's also our state lead for Louisiana for the project. And she shared that for the species that we've selected, they're not very commonly found in people's yards, and so it's been difficult to ask people to track them. She's been trying to look out for more natural areas, or, you know, kind of prairie remnants and things like that, where she might find these species. They have been able to find several sites to add buttonbush to, but that's really been the only species that she's been able to add. So that's just something that she's run into. And I know that I think we mentioned this on the last call, and Katie Boyer had connected us with a refuge person who then shared out the information with some of the coastal refuges. So I know there's been stuff going on to try to get the word out a little bit more, but I don't know if anyone else has run into that, where this species list just doesn't seem like it has a lot of common species where you are. Has anyone had that experience? Feel free to share, put it in the chat. Another thing we talked about at our last call was maybe if we had something where we could help with promotion to try to like just spread the word about the project. So I put together, there's a postcard flyer that we have, a postcard size flyer we have about the project that's on the landing page, which we can put in the chat. And then I also made it's like a bulletin size poster. I think it's like 11 by 18 or something like that is what the size is meant to be printed at. And that was another suggestion, I think from Gail, and she mentioned maybe like sharing it at libraries or someplace where they have a kiosk where they could put something up that would be large enough that people could see it. So I have this poster available. I haven't printed any yet because I wasn't sure how many. So if anyone is interested in them, I would be happy to have some printed and then I could send some to you. I think it's the most cost efficient to like print a big batch and then I can send them out to you all. So please let me know. You can unmute if you want or put in the chat if you think you have some spots where you could put up a poster like this. Or if you want even the postcard size, maybe you're doing like a tabling event or something, or you have like a central visitor center or something like that where you could put something out. We'd be happy to send you copies of this or the postcard sized flyer. So just let us know what we can send you. And Julie asks, is anyone working with master gardeners? We rely on Master Naturalist Program volunteers for much of our Nature's Notebook observation support. I have not reached out to master gardeners or garden clubs. Yeah, that's a great thought. We do work with master gardeners. I don't know that we are connected with them. Trying to remember, I think it's been Master Naturalists in every place that we've reached out to. So yeah, that could be a great place. I don't know if you have contacts there, Julie. We can try to look for the contacts, but if you already have someone or that's there, that's always a better way to reach out, if you already have that personal contact.
Yeah, I can figure out our local master gardeners for sure, and start to network the garden clubs. And I'm glad to see that they're already networked in Texas. That's great. So I think we just need to rebuild, in part, we need to rebuild our program sort of post-COVID. It really lapsed in terms of observers overall. And I actually think that the focus on pollinators will be a good hook. Because more people are interested in, I think, the service, or that drawing that connection really is attractive to people beyond a sort of basic conservation ethic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
I was going to make another, and I'll put this in the chat too, but by the way, this year, Saturday, September 24th is National Public Lands Day. So for all like federal lands, and maybe also for other public lands, I'm ignorant. That's sort of a focal day for volunteerism and special programming at public lands, and might be a great opportunity to promote this program.
Cool. Yeah, would you want to have some postcard flyers for that? There'll be an event.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Yes, that'd be great.
Yeah, maybe I'll make a Google form that asks like your name and address and like how many of each you want, and then that'll be an easier way to send them out. Yeah, and Texas Master Naturalist. So yeah, they had a virtual fair back in May, and I did present about this project, and we actually got about 20 people that said they were interested. So that's been a really great source of some observers for Nature's Notebook and iNaturalist as well. I think a lot of you already know, I don't know if we mentioned this today, but we're encouraging both observations in Nature's Notebook as well as iNaturalist. And so that's what's on the postcard, and then the bulletin flyer here is kind of like 2 ways to participate. And I did look into the iNaturalist data a little bit to see if we had any sort of a bump with these species, but it's hard to, I'd have to like pull down all the data for each species and state separately. So I just looked at a few and I didn't really see too much of a pattern, but hopefully eventually we would see more data coming in on these particular 8 species in iNaturalist as well. But I think about half of the Texas master naturalists indicated they were interested in iNaturalist because it's apparently very popular in that state, and so they have a lot of people that are already using that platform. But that would be great to get more postcards handed out there for sure at their event.
Hey, Erin, I'm so sorry. My previous meeting went super late, but this is like the perfect time to jump in because yeah, I will definitely send you an email and give you an address and ask for some of the little postcards or even the brochure, as I'm going to a meeting in a couple of weeks, but it's a nationwide meeting, and I had already asked if I could do a plug for this program, and they have a special like roundtable where they're just asking different researchers to listen to different ideas, that like things that they can do to help engage with the public. And I asked if anyone was doing anything on Nature's Notebook or iNaturalist, and they're like, no. I'm like, great. So
Awesome.
I'm hoping for a pretty broad audience.
That sounds great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I'll definitely I'll send out a form, I think, just to kind of like collect everyone's addresses and what they want. That sounds good. Did you want to share anything else from New Mexico? We kind of skipped the state updates part. We were going to do it at the end.
At this point, we are actually kind of ramping back up. We have a lot more engagement. I think, yeah, we, even though actually COVID cases are kind of on the rise right now in this area, we actually have a lot of schools and groups that are wanting to come out. We've done a second training, and I think we're looking to engage more students now in some of the phenology monitoring. So it's kind of an exciting to see the program coming back to in person and increased engagement.
That's great. Have you guys have you had any trouble with the species list, the 8 that we have? Does it seem like
yes.
there's yeah.
Yeah, it's heavily adapted to to what we have.
Sounds good.
Yeah, especially I know a lot of the lists are really or species are kind of more garden or can be found in people's gardens, but because of where we're working and even some of the restoration areas, yeah, it's definitely an altered list that we work with when we do the trainings.
Okay, cool. So we did earlier, we looked at some of the showy milkweed data from New Mexico, and that seemed like the one species that you guys have there that's maybe more common.
Yeah.
Cool. Just checking the chat to see if there's anything else. So a couple other people said that they would like posters and stuff. So yes, I will definitely get that. I'll put that in the follow-up email, a form that has the questions about how many would like. All right. Any other thoughts on, do you feel like if you were able to get people that were engaged and interested, do you feel like you have enough information where you could kind of get them started in terms of either using Nature's Notebook or iNaturalist, in terms of, feeling comfortable with like getting them set up either through a training or just kind of like sending them to the right place to get started on the website?
So I was gonna chime in again. One of the things that we have found is that it is really easy to get them started on Nature's Notebook. But then if they want to have their own trees or patch that they're monitoring, I don't know if there's an easy pamphlet on how to get the website set up for a new observation group or site.
Okay, yeah. So we've been working on our observer certification course for Nature's Notebook. So I would probably point people there. You know, as soon as they create an account, they'll see that information when they log in. So I would probably send people there that will walk them through how do you set up a site, how do you add plant, how do you edit your data, and then we have more advanced learning modules as well that really cover, you know, how do you identify different phenophases, and then like the open flowers, and then even the intensity questions that we have about, you know, not just do you see open flowers, but what percent of the flowers on your plant are open. So we have information to kind of help them, you know, tips on how to estimate those things. So I would definitely recommend, you know, having people complete that course.
Is that that is great, thank you. And actually we have directed some people there, but again, I'm looking at, is there like an existing, I guess I can create a little handout with those resources just so that, because I'm trying to get people to jump in from very different areas, that they have everything they need in one place so that they can actually kind of not have to look around for different resources.
Yeah, so I think on the landing page, I think we do have kind of a getting started guide. Is that right, Alyssa? Maybe you could look.
Yeah.
I think there's like a one-page thing that says the basics, and it has iNaturalist and Nature's Notebook, and it's basically like go to this website to get started. And it has a little bit of a summary of like what we're asking them to do as well, I think. So that could be something that you could print out and hand out to people. But if that doesn't work, yeah, let me know exactly what you're looking for. You know, we do have like these third cut flyers about Nature's Notebook where there's like 3 on a page. And that's just basically like why you would want to observe, but it doesn't tell you, you know, go to this website and create an account. So yeah, if that's more what you're looking for, let me know.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other thoughts on data collection? If not, I did want to share just a couple grant opportunities that we have seen go by, and you guys might be aware of these already. This one is a seed grant where they're looking for people that are doing habitat restoration projects. You can get free native wildflower seeds. And so this is on, if you go to the pollinator.org website, it's like one of the first things on that website. And I think the deadline's October 1st for that. And there are like, you know, restrictions on when you have to plant by. So in case that's of interest. And then this one was more specifically focused on projects that were related to butterflies and moths. So there's a lot of different types of grants, and they're a little bit larger grants of up to 10,000. It also has the deadline in October, but lots of different topics that you can have for your project for this one. And this is also on pollinator.org, and this is the link there. So I don't know if anyone knows of any other opportunities, but please feel free to share them. And I think that was it for this slide. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I can put those links in the chat too.
Yeah, do you want to ask your question out loud, Stephanie, or just jump in?
Yeah, thanks. So I was wondering ultimately what will happen with this data. Will you use it to, I mean, I work with a lot of native plant growers, and one of the things that keeps me up at night in the spring is watching the monarch migration moving toward Oklahoma and seeing that the milkweed is teeny tiny, like it did last spring when we had such a cool spring and the ground was cold. And so I thought maybe to combat that, I could work with some of my native plant growers to start milkweed much earlier, that we could have available just throwing pots outside or that sort of thing. Is this the kind of thing that you'll do with this data? I mean, what are next steps after you kind of collect all this data?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's a great example that we haven't, I don't think we've gone back as much to that question of like growing out early. That did to come up during our workshops, but we do have control points. It's not just like waiting for climate change to see, in 20 years, like it's going to be 10 days earlier or whatever. So maybe, I don't know, Erin can jump in too, but we will create this next year of the project, we'll create like a story map with information and context and some calendars about these key species, like when they're blooming and seed times are happening. And then I think we'll do a little preliminary bit of like, how do bloom and seed times in these species respond to temperature and precipitation, with this idea that you could be looking for like, I mean, this may be like not so practical, but just the general big picture idea is like, you could be thinking about species assemblages for your, native prairie restoration that would have bloom times in like 2030 or 2050 that would support pollinators throughout the year, because they would we would sort of know when they were happening and how they were responding to the changes that we're expecting in terms of temperature and rainfall in the future. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, is what I imagine doing, because I'm thinking about putting together a big group call to a bunch of growers. Is that a practical way to help, or does that kind of interrupt with species being able to adapt to what's happening?
Ooh, that's a big question. That's a great question that I don't know the answer to, and like anyone else should definitely jump in. I think, I mean, I feel like you all know much more about like monarch ecology than I do, but it's not like monarchs can use other species as host plants, at least. And so it feels like if we're focused on monarch conservation, putting out monarchs earlier, because monarch migration is happening earlier, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Thank you.
Other thoughts on that? Who else was talking about that? I wish Jane Breckenridge from Tribal Alliance for Pollinators was here. She definitely is. She's, they grow, they have a seed bank and grow out and sell and give away. I know they were thinking about that as well. Are you in touch with her already, Stephanie?
I have been, and I was hoping she'd be on this call.
Yeah.
So I'd ask her, but I'll just reach out to her personally.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Any last thoughts or opportunities you want to mention or questions? All right, so we will send a follow-up email with the recording. We can share the slides that we shared today, and then the form about anyone that wants the flyers to hand out in various places. Anything else, Melissa or anyone?
if there's anything else that folks are hoping to get out of these quarterly calls, or out of if you're like the sort of like networking function, like if you're looking for someone, like maybe what the conversation with Stephanie just now, like, finding an expert who knows X, Y, or Z, feel free to jump in with that or email us after too.
All right, well, thanks everyone for coming, and to see you on the next call.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.